The boy was born in a place both soft and hard, Louisville, Kentucky, where the Ohio River curled like a ribbon kissed by the breath of steamships, and the streets shimmered with summer dust. It was 1942. The world was at war, and so was America, though on different fronts, out across oceans, and deep within itself. Beneath the skin of the city, there were lines you did not cross, colors you did not mix, songs you did not sing where everyone could hear. But young Cassius did not walk with that caution. His feet carried rhythm before they ever touched canvas. His tongue was sharp with promise. He had not yet seen the world, but something deep inside him already knew he would not just live in it. He would move it. He was not born into glory. He was born into ordinariness. And perhaps that's where many stories begin. His father painted signs and dreams in equal measures. His mother sang gospel songs beneath her breath while folding laundry and pressing shirt collars. Their home hummed with coil heater warmth and southern rituals, fried cornmeal, Sunday service, sit-down dinners even when the bills warned otherwise. There was laughter, there was discipline, there was struggle inked quietly between the pages of their days, and then the bicycle, red, shiny, full of freedom, a gift, a treasure, and one evening, it was gone. Just like that, someone took it and left a hole where boyhood trust used to live. Cassius was 12. He didn't cry. He stormed. He told a police officer, "Gonna whoop whoever took it." The officer, Joe Martin, listened. And maybe he saw something there. Not a boy with broken pride, but a quiet force, thick with volcanic promise. So, he pointed the boy to a boxing gym. In that place of sweat and echoes, young Cassius found a mirror for his own flame. He wasn't big, wasn't bruising, but his fists moved like verses, and he could talk. Oh, he could talk. He was all edges and declarations, a kind of silver noise in a dim-lit place, still uncertain, still soft in places, still just a boy in hand-me-down gloves. But each punch was a paragraph, each combination a chapter. By the time he stepped onto the international stage, Rome, 1960, Cassius Clay was not just a name, he was a current. He wore a nation's dream tucked beneath his robe. He boxed like he belonged to a different element. Air, maybe. Fire on certain days. He danced. He beamed. And when he won the Olympic gold, he didn't roar. Not outwardly. Even when he lifted his arms to the rafters, something about it felt like a quiet fulfillment, like passing the threshold of a long dream now made real by breath and bruises. But gold doesn't weigh the same for everyone. He came home, medal around his neck, smile stretched clean across his cheeks. And still, he couldn't sit in a Louisville diner, not without being asked to leave. America saw his triumph and set it beside its discomfort, unsure still what to do with a proud black man in a white world. Some say he threw the medal into the river that summer, not in anger, but in surrender. A symbol can't outrun a reality. A boy can't eat honor, and pride, though valuable, won't change hearts overnight. But he didn't spiral into silence. He began his professional career with a voice, that startling musical voice, not just punches now, but poetry. He rhymed about rounds, promised knockouts, told the press what round they'd fall. People laughed at him, called him cocky, said he'd be humbled quick. Yet in every bout, he moved like truth, slippery, sudden, untouchable. Through his early victories, the country came to know Cassius Clay not as a fluke or a novelty, but a phenomenon. No two fights the same, no predictions ever wasted. He understood that rhythm was power. That performance wasn't just what happened inside the ropes, but in the dance before the bell. And with every fight, a myth emerged that this young man wasn't just a boxer, he was a storm in human skin. But behind the curtain, there was still a boy, digging, learning, listening, reading the words of Elijah Muhammad, asking where his fire came from, wondering if his fists were the answer or just the instrument. The world saw flash, but in his heart a deeper rumble grew, a whisper of something ancient, something necessary. He would one day change his name, but the seed of that transformation, it was already blooming, even as he stood in his corner, robe wrapped tight, heart drumming a song only he could hear. His voice arrived before his fists were ever tested at the highest level. Cassius Clay didn't just box, he pronounced. He laughed in rhyme. He declared the round before it began. He gave interviews as if reciting scripture written by lightning. He called himself the greatest before his record earned it. And still, somehow, people listened. He was tall, lean, and lovely, they said. A body like poured glass, arms hanging long and springy, like something God designed to slip past doubt and land clean on certainty. He wasn't muscle-bound like the old champions. He was grace in gloves, every motion a verse, every jab a comma in a longer sentence only he could speak. Still, to many, he was noise, a disruption, the Louisville lip. He bragged, he preened. They said he was a clown. And yet, those who stepped into the ring with him learned quickly that his words were only echoes of truth, arriving early. He would do what he said. Timing was a weapon he owned. And certainty, his signature. When he stood across from Sonny Liston in 1964, the world saw him as a lamb at the altar of punishment. Liston was a monster among men, thick-shouldered, dead-eyed, a heavyweight of the old world, cold and deliberate. He had crushed the kindly Floyd Patterson, and it seemed only a fool or a prophet would challenge him. Cassius was both, in different hours. He called Liston a bear. He mocked his scowl. He told the press he would float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. They laughed. How could a boy so lean and loud survive the silence of Liston's fists? But beneath the glitter and grin lived terror. Cassius later admitted he was afraid. The night before the fight, he couldn't sleep. His heart kicked against his ribs like it wanted out. Fear crept into his hands and made them tremble. But he had long since learned how to turn trembling into theater. When they met in the ring, something changed. Cassius didn't run. He danced. The old world moved in slow, predictable lines. But Cassius, he curled around time itself. He hit and wasn't hit. He teased gravity. Liston reached with power, but found only smoke. And then, victory, the 7th round. Liston's corner ended it. Shock stole the voices of those who'd cheered hours before. Cassius Clay had done the unthinkable. The loud-mouthed youth had toppled a titan, and in the center of the ring that night, arms raised to the heavens, he shouted a truth he had always known. I shook up the world. But something larger happened, quiet and unseen. Behind closed doors, inside his gaze, a transformation had long been brewing. Just days after the fight, he stepped into the world not as Cassius Marcellus Clay, but as Muhammad Ali, a name not born of fame, but of faith, a severing, not from family, but from a history imposed. He had met Malcolm X. He had read Elijah Muhammad. He had sat in rooms where questions were asked, with fury, not politeness. Why bow heads to names given by slave owners? Why fight for a nation that still divided its lunch counters? The Nation of Islam spoke to a hunger inside him, a hunger that gold couldn't feed, that belts couldn't hold. So, he changed, not just the way he was addressed, but the compass that guided him. When the press scoffed, "Why change your name now?" his answer was clear: because it was time. To many, the act was defiance. To Ali, it was reverence. Now, he wasn't merely a fighter. He was a mirror, lifted toward America's face. And not everyone liked what they saw. Fans grew uneasy. Some turned away. Broadcasters stumbled over his new name, hesitant or unwilling. But Ali did not shrink. He did not blink. His vocabulary expanded beyond the boundaries of sport. He spoke of dignity, of unity, of black pride, in a land not ready to hear it from men wearing robes made of silk and gold trim. He kept boxing. He kept winning. And with each victory, the divide grew. Was he a hero or a disruption? Was he a patriot or a radical? Ali walked forward, not with malice, but with something deeper, purpose. In press conferences, he turned threats into lullabies of warning. "If you even dream of beating me, you'd better wake up and apologize." Reporters gawked. Fighters fumed. But in gyms, in barbershops, in schoolyards, kids started to chant, not just his name, but the electricity of it, the being of it. And beneath the bravado, there was craft, meticulous preparation, study, footwork carved into his bones from years of silent practice. He didn't just talk greatness, he trained it, and then layered his flair over it, like the scent of cologne on a warrior's skin. But even Ali knew words can only go so far. There would be other battles, some in rings, some in courtrooms, some in the very heart of what it meant to be free in America. Still, for now, the nation watched, some with awe, some with clenched jaw, but all with attention. The boy who once chased a bicycle thief now held the world's gaze, and in that widening circle of eyes, he began to understand his real fight was only just beginning. They whispered him a traitor. The man who had so brazenly claimed the world's attention now stood still, arms unclenched, fists by his side, unflinching. Muhammad Ali faced the fire, not with fury, but with certainty. In 1967, he refused induction into the United States Army, not out of fear, not out of privilege, but out of principle. My conscience won't let me go shoot my brother, or some darker people, or some poor, hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America, he said. And shoot them for what? In one breath, he surrendered his heavyweight title, a career mid-flight, and perhaps even his freedom. In that refusal lived more defiance than 1,000 punches, stillness spoken louder than any blow he'd ever thrown. They stripped him of what he had earned. No title, no license, no permission. Some called him coward, others pariah. But Ali waited, unapologetic, unrelenting, undimmed. He did not vanish. Instead, he spoke, on campuses, in churches, from hand-built pulpits and radio waves soaked in static. He traded gloves for a microphone, and still he hit, not opponents, but assumptions, not ribs, but rules, all while appellate courts shuffled paper and delayed fate with trembling pens. Without the ring, he searched for rhythm elsewhere. He read more, taught more, knelt in quiet prayer, and then stood tall before audiences who'd never seen such steel wrapped in silk. He was only in his 20s, a storm stalled mid-air, brilliance halted by bars invisible and bureaucratic. But sometimes, to fight is to wait, to not be moved, even when moving is safer. He taught that stillness could have purpose, that pause does not mean peace has given up. And though money dried and fame grew quiet, he never begged for favor. Instead, he sharpened his message like a blade against time. He was not just a boxer now. He had become an idea. For 3.5 years, the world fought without him. Heavyweights came and went. Champions rose and fell. But none captured the pulse. The heartbeat had left the ring with Ali. Children who once cheered for his footwork now watched him speak of justice, of faith, of what it meant to stand for something larger than wealth, larger than even legacy. He told them to dream awake, to wrestle dignity back from a nation that too often bartered it for comfort. In this exile, he became more, not through victory, but through value, tested on every level, but never burned away. The law tried to cut him down, threatened prison, but even in the shadow of a sentence, he held his ground. His appeal climbed all the way to the top, lingering, suspended like breath before a verdict. And while the outcome remained uncertain, Ali carried on as though freedom was not theirs to give or take. Then, in 1970, a window cracked. Atlanta first, then New York. His license returned. His suspension lifted, but not forgotten. The Supreme Court would not overturn his conviction until 1971. For nearly 4 years, he had been sued by silence, and yet he returned. Not cautiously, not tentatively, but with the full bloom of a man aged by fire. The punches may have slowed, the reflexes fractionally dulled, but something else had ripened, a depth, a gravity. He was no longer dancing just for glory. He stood now as a symbol, no longer merely an athlete, but a thread in the fabric of change, woven through movements, stitched into sermons, sung about in streets. He spoke for those who had no microphones, who went to war while he stayed home and stood still, absorbing the weight of their uncertainty. And still, he was divisive. Not everyone forgave. Some never would. But Ali did not show up to be forgiven. He showed up to speak the truth and let it echo wherever it needed to land. The cost was never hidden. He knew what he'd lost. Years of peak performance, millions in earnings, adoration easily kept if he'd bowed just once. But he did not bow. He had learned that the mightiest act of strength may be standing up by not standing in line. That fighting can sometimes mean laying down your arms and daring the world to move you. Ali did not beg history to remember him. He quietly offered it something to feel, something unshakable. In the slowness of his exile, he became timeless. And so the stage was set, not just for a return to combat, fist against fist, man against man, but for a continuation of something deeper. The comeback would be thunderous, yes, but only because it rose from a silence that had already shaken the world. When Muhammad Ali returned, the air was heavier, not with doubt, no, but with expectation. The world remembered the boy who danced, who sang with his feet and answered cynicism with craft. But now, the years had settled like ash over his body. He was no longer just the dreamer. He was the dream, weathered. He faced Jerry Quarry first, then Oscar Bonavena, and finally, the challenger became a challenger again, thrust into the ring with Joe Frazier, a man molded from granite and grief. The fight of the century, they called it in 1971. Madison Square Garden heaved with anticipation. Frazier fought like a fire, unwilling to die, and Ali, still dazzling but not weightless, found himself earthbound, not broken, but bent. That night, Frazier made the myth bleed. A hook, then another, and finally, Ali tasted the mat in the 15th round. Pain was no stranger, but it had never come this publicly, this definitively. He lost, and yet something peculiar stirred in the loss. He stayed standing, even as the decision turned to Frazier. His words that followed were not dressed in excuses. He knew the war wasn't over. One round, one fight. These were only chapters. And in Ali's story, chapters rearranged themselves like jazz, unpredictable, aching, electric. 2 years passed, and he fought again, earned wins, chased meaning. Then came the echo. Frazier again. They met a second time in 1974, and this time the gods stood still. Ali took the decision in a fight less mythic, but no less important. It was rebalancing, a recalibration of legends inching toward closure. But the true theater awaited them both. Manila, 1975, the thriller. It was not a fight. It was revelation in leather and light. 38 combined rounds already behind them, but it was here, heavy with sweat and sun and suffering, that their rivalry burned clean. The heat was stifling, a cocoon of pain wrapped in glory, and they punished each other like brothers on opposite ends of God's mercy. Ali called it the closest thing to death he had ever known. Frazier's face swelled to memory's edge. Ali, cracked and wilting, kept punching. In the 14th, with 1 round left, Frazier's corner stopped it. He could not see, could not breathe, and Ali, his body already halfway into collapse, was declared the victor. But victory tasted like steel, hollow, beautiful, brutal. Just a year earlier, another theater had unfolded far from Manila, the Congo, Zaire, 1974. The rumble in the jungle. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a coronation disguised as reckoning. George Foreman, younger, stronger, undefeated. He was the storm coming toward Ali. People feared for him. Foreman was no Frazier. He was raw force, ungiving, a hammer swung by inevitability. Ali smiled. From the moment they arrived in Africa, the energy was strange, spiritual, prophetic. Crowds chanted Ali Bomaye, Ali, kill him. But Ali did not intend to kill. He intended to teach. In the ring, he leaned against the ropes, invited punishment, absorbed it. Foreman raged and pounded round after round as Ali, instead of dancing, waited. They called it rope-a-dope, but it was something older, more sacred. It was patience as art. A test of erosion. By the 8th round, Foreman had emptied his storm. Sweat poured like confession. Breath came slow, and Ali uncaged. A 6-punch combination, swift, clear, final. Foreman fell into the canvas, bewildered, and the jungle, that ancient land, roared in revelation. Ali had reclaimed the heavyweight crown, not through dominance, but design. Through intellect, through intuition too delicate to teach. Afterward, Foreman would say he'd never felt weaker, that Ali's silence between rounds unnerved him, that Ali spoke only when it served, and rested when it mattered most. Even Ali admitted he was almost gone. His ribs screamed, his arms ached. But still he rose, not from strength, but from resolve. What most missed was the metaphor that sometimes you win not by charging forward, but by standing still and letting the world exhaust itself, trying to break you. These battles, against Fraser, against Foreman, were not just contests of power. They were odysseys of identity, of spirit. Ali understood his body was a vessel, but his will was eternal. He had become what few men dare to be, a myth with memory, a storm who learned to whisper, then wait, then strike. And even as his joints stiffened, even as his fists slowed, Ali's voice did not falter. His interviews filled with grace, his poems with pathos, and slowly, where once stood critics, now came pilgrims. He was no longer just a boxer. He was a sermon wrapped in skin and sweat and silence. He walked slower in the later years, not out of weariness, but as if surveying a world he no longer felt the need to chase. His feet, once so quick they could outpace prediction, had begun to deliberate, measured steps, a quiet choreography of surrender and peace. Parkinson's came like a whisper at first, shaky hands, a tremor beneath the skin. But Ali did not curse the shaking, did not hide the shadows collecting at the edges of his voice. Just as he had once held the fury of the world and smiled, now he welcomed frailty without fear. Strength, after all, had never really been about muscles alone. His speech slowed. Words took longer to arrive, but their weight increased. Each syllable held echoes of younger years, of poems shouted under stadium lights, of sermons disguised as press conferences. Now they came softer, but no less meaningful. The world, too, had changed. Where once he stirred controversy, now he inspired tribute. The years had softened the parts of the country that had once clenched against him. Letters arrived from presidents. Hands that once pointed carried bouquets now. Journalists who had stumbled over Muhammad now spoke the name reverently, like passing a prayer across the lips. And then, Atlanta, 1996. The Olympic Games returned to American soil, and in a moment soaked in silence and significance, a torch waited. Nearly 5 decades after he had first worn Olympic gold and returned to segregation, Muhammad Ali stood, trembling, but upright, and lifted flame with both unsteady hands. The roar that followed wasn't loud. It was enormous, a sound too full to describe. It came from lungs and hearts and histories, all crashing into a single instant. There were no rounds, no knockdowns, only a man, flickering, lighting something that would blaze long after he stepped away from the stage. That image of Ali in white, holding eternal fire, told more than any fight. It was a closing of a book, mid-sentence. Knowing the story didn't really need a final word. He had made his peace not by winning everything, but by refusing to yield when it mattered. In the years that followed, the public saw less of him. Photos appeared, him smiling gently, fingers curled slightly inward, sitting beside loved ones, watching, always watching, a man who had spoken truths in youth, now whispered them through stillness, still connecting, still present. He became grandfather and icon, puzzle and prayer all in one. Children who hadn't heard his voice in full still recognized the face, the flame of it. Tattoos bore his silhouette. Murals climbed brick walls. Quotes circled classrooms. He had become bigger than biography, a myth made gentle by memory. And in 2016, when he passed, the globe paused, not in suddenness, but in reverence. They mourned not because he was gone, but because someone so deeply human had managed to live like an idea, to defy time not with youth, but with meaning. Flags were lowered, voices cracked on air, but between those griefs, something more powerful bloomed. People gathered, black, white, Muslim, Christian, fighters, poets, children, elders. They came not to say goodbye, but to testify, to repeat stories, to laugh, sometimes cry, to remember that winning isn't the only thing that survives. It's the way you win, the reason behind the fight. Ali had left lessons behind, tucked gently inside glove and verse. That conviction has a weather, that dignity never needs an audience, that the quietest man in the arena may carry the biggest truth in his chest. He had shouted the world awake. Then slowly, gracefully, he showed us how to rest. There is a stillness that lingers in legacy, a silence rich with echoes. Muhammad Ali left not only medals and photographs, but a breath in the air, a whisper that moves through time the way fog travels across water, gentle, sure, untouched by urgency. Even now, long after the last bell tolled on his life, his presence doesn't feel gone. It feels paused, as if somewhere, beyond this world's constant clatter, he's floating again, arms raised, spirit unburdened, above noise, above doubt. Still, the echo of him remains, not just in the reels and documentaries, in museum glass or bronze statues, but in moments, in children who speak boldly, even when afraid, in athletes who say no, even when told only to entertain, in voices rising from margins, certain that truth belongs on center stage. When someone wins by sheer might, they leave records. When someone wins by spirit, they leave rhythms. Ali's rhythms live in poetry, in protest, in dance, in silence. They pulse in the pause before action, in the trembling hand that lifts again, in defiance wrapped not in anger, but in grace. You see it on playgrounds, where a young boy in worn sneakers declares, "I'm the greatest," with nothing to prove, but everything to give. You hear it in rings, in speeches, in lines of verse, summoned long after the source has gone quiet. His myth breathes, not in retelling, but in refeeling. He taught that greatness doesn't mean infallibility, that you can fall and lose, and doubt, and still be more than your victories. That courage is not the absence of fear, but a relationship with it. He invited the world to see a different kind of strength, one that sang, one that stood still, one that served. Even the way he transformed, from brash Cassius to thoughtful Ali, traced a path many of us still follow, to become more than what the world expects, to choose names, faiths, paths that reflect who we truly are, not who we're told to be. He didn't just fight opponents, he challenged the mirror, the map, the myth of quiet obedience. And what remained when the gloves fell silent and the lights dimmed was a man, not always perfect, not always understood, but profoundly human. He laughed, he forgave, he listened more, in the end, than he ever had to. Somewhere along the way, the icon became a teacher, without saying so. There's a power in getting older, in becoming quiet while the world spins faster. Ali wore age not as a retreat, but as a crown. Even as Parkinson's peeled away motion and sound, it couldn't touch meaning. In his stillness, he gave us sanctuary, proof that the soul need not shout to be heard. He remains a chapter not closed, but continually reread. The low hum of justice, the heartbeat of unbending faith. His words are found not just in mouths, but in knees buckled in humility, in arms lifted in resilience, in silence held for the ones who walked before. And now, if you lean into the hush, you can still feel him, not in volume, not in roar, but in a quiet, living thunder, a kind of sacred remembering, a whisper of the game that still dares us to play it with soul.